Hi. What is the difference between analog, HD and IP camera? Technology used, intelligence, I mean how smart they can be, picture quality, mainly its resolution, sensitivity, ability to work with infrared, transmission, so the way the signal is sent. As you remember from that big picture of the shopping center, old analog cameras had very limited resolution. So CIF was 352 by 240, D1, which is 4 CIF, was 720 by 480, and was the max you could get. Had very low sensitivity. No, they were not good in night vision, and in those old cameras, most cases, there was no infrared built in. You had to have special lights, infrared lights, and so on. Those cameras also were not good for the outside. They required additional housing, and the heater should be in that housing, and so on. In general, on all those cameras ran on the coax RG59 and use BNC connectors. RG59 is the most common cable, but we will talk about cables a little bit later. New analog HD cameras have much higher resolution. Again, I just have a look again at this lesson with this picture of the shopping center. So you can have, for instance, I'll call it small HD or something like that, which is 1280 by 720, or full HD 920 by 1080, or even higher. You can have 3 megapixel, 5 megapixel, or even 8 megapixel cameras, which are HD cameras. In those modern cameras, they have already incorporated infrared. They have LEDs around the lenses. They have a modern self-contained design, and they don't require extra housing. Again, most of the cases, 90-something%. Again, they use coax RG59. You can use RG6 and BNC. Then use BNC connectors. As for IP cameras, the difference is mostly in transmission. So in a HD camera, those HD cameras, signal is not compressed in the camera. So it's a lot of data on that signal, and it's analog signal in most cases. We'll be talking later also about types of HD protocols, but most of them are analog. So there's a lot of data going through that RG59 coax cable, where it's obviously there's no encryption in IP cameras, except beside the fact that you can have much higher resolution in an easier way. So for instance, you can have a 8 megapixel camera, and it's all compressed and then sent over the network cable. So with different types of compression, the best one being H265 plus, the signal will be still small. Data will be still, there won't be that much data because of the compression. And another thing is that the whole compression happens in the camera. So for instance, you can have a 4 megapixel camera, but in the camera settings you can make it smaller. You can make it 2 megapixel. If for some reasons you cannot, your DVR can, so you can buy a bigger camera. You say, what's the point of buying better camera if you have to lower the resolution on the camera? Well, you may be buying new camera to the old DVR or NVR, which cannot handle 5 or 8 megapixel. So you will lower your 5 megapixel camera to 2 megapixel camera. But then when you upgrade your NVR or DVR, you will be able to turn it back to whatever resolution you want. So it's a very handy feature that you just log into the IP camera and you can change the resolution. Again, in IP cameras, you have, as in the modern HD, you have incorporated infrared. You have those LEDs around the lenses, and that's pretty decent distance. modern design, self-contained, no need for extra housing. And there is also something what's called PoE. Again, we'll be talking about this in a separate lesson, explaining exactly how it works. But just in this one, it's just power sent over the network cable. And then another advantage of those IP cameras is that they're using Cat5, Cat5e cable, which is cheaper than coax, and you can send also power over it. So its installation is cheaper, basically. Cameras are not really much more expensive than HD cameras. It's all very similar. Obviously, they'll be more expensive than the old analog cameras, but nobody's using those anymore. IP versus analog, HD analog. IP can get higher resolution in easy. Maybe it's not like that you cannot have HD in the same resolution, just it's easier to do with IP. IP has no need for PSU because you can use that PoE. IP picture is already compressed and encrypted, so for instance, nobody can, without knowing password of the and protocol of the camera, you cannot hack into the camera actually. So where on the HD you can cut the cable, put a BNC splitter, and you have a picture, whatever. IP can be intelligent, so there are ANPR cameras, people counting. IP can be wireless. Another important feature of IP camera is that it can be standalone. So you don't need a DVR if you have no need for recording. You just have to see what's happening. It can be standalone camera. And as an example, video intercoms. You have IP intercoms with the IP camera. So basically, you're not recording, you're just viewing who's there, who's ringing your bell. But IP is more difficult for troubleshooting for most of the engineers. And it is. And depending how it was installed, obviously, because if it's, you have a plan of where the equipment is and so on, it's much easier. But I had so many installations I went to fix where nobody knew where the switches are, nobody knew where the PoE injectors are. It was just nightmare. But just this fault of original installation. Thank you.